Kim, welcome to our last webinar before the end of 2022. I've decided to dress up in some Christmas attire. Now, we're going to be talking today about co-parenting at Christmas and how to cope with your first Christmas after divorce. And we've got my favourite guest on the show today, Dr. Michael Smith. Hi, Michael.
Hey Bridget, how much do I owe you for that intro?
It's free because it's
I,
Christmas.
I just want to point out to the people that are viewing right now that literally you are present.
I know. I made it from the $2 shop, so
They might want their $2 back. Just saying, just putting that out there. Hey, it's nice to see you, even if it's artificial and online, but it seems to be the nature of stuff these days.
yeah, absolutely. So lovely to have everyone watching tonight or listening to the recording. We're just going to give people a couple of minutes to join us, and then we'll get started. We'll probably give them about a minute, or even
A whole 60
less.
seconds. Merry Christmas.
Right, okay. So I'm Bridget Jackson, founder of Equal X's, divorce coach, divorce mediator, qualified lawyer. We're live today with Michael Smith from Might Psychology. And Michael is a qualified child psychologist, family therapist, and also an RPM instructor. He works with many families, children, adolescents who have a range of personal, social, and relationship issues. And he's going to talk to us today about co-parenting during the Christmas and New Year period and how to survive and cope with the first Christmas after divorce in terms of being a parent and from child's perspective. So tell us more about what you do, Michael.
Yeah, no, that's a really a great broad spectrum of what I sort of do. I work with families and children in particular around managing change. But at the heart of all of this, of course, is what is it that a child sees as their success and what is it that makes them happy? And it sounds kind of simplistic, but those two basic things underpin so many other things that that is the kind of the key component of the work I do. And it's not necessarily just with children, but it's also with the families and extended families, but it kind of creeps into school settings and hobbies and pastimes and little things that we kind of take for granted. But I don't treat one thing as sort of a little box. It's sort of what is the bigger picture and how do they make their success and where does their happiness come from, working that out.
Yeah, yeah. So how do separated families make it easier to co-parent leading up to Christmas?
It's a difficult question, and to be fair, it can be really challenging for some families. And for people who are new to this process, I mean, obviously they've had the good sense and guidance to come through the process with yourself, which is, fantastic, good place to start. But first time up, we're navigating perhaps the most important holiday season on the back of, and if we're looking at this year, previous years where COVID's been such a huge prevalence. So for new families and new positions, it's kind of thinking, right, well, how do we make this work? And with so much of what we do, the heart of this is really clear and as motionless communication as possible. When I say emotionless, I mean the fact that there are emotions involved, but this is the facts and the figures and the details, the dates and whatever's going to happen so that both parents are on the same page from the child's perspective.
Yeah, yeah. Great answer. Now, conflict inevitably during the Christmas period escalates with every family's being around for a extended period of time.
Yeah.
What can people do to reduce the conflict?
Hide the jam spoon. Um, I think, we have to be upfront around the fact that Christmas is full of expectation. There are pressures involved. We can think about the interpersonal things. We can think about the financial things. We can think about the fact that, and as I just said, COVID is still a factor. I mean, we had, 42,000 new cases last week. It's still here. So conflict comes out of when people feel compressed or pushed into a corner, feel they don't have a way out, that whatever their expectations has been put on them and they can't meet them. There's a whole raft of different things inside of this which are going to have an impact on people, which comes out as conflict.
Yeah.
Accept that that's a normal reaction internally. Grab hold of that and say, hang on, I need to do something with this. It doesn't mean sit with it. It means holding ourselves for maybe 2 or 3 seconds to say, hang on, how do I want this to turn out? Having to be divinely patient with your own self whilst things get sorted.
So communication, hey.
Yeah, that's kind of
How
the
do
the cornerstone to it. And
mm,
it is a difficult thing because going through a separation divorce process, as I've just said, emotions are big and there's a lot of stuff in there. But, and here's the really big but, in the sense that if we can prioritize the children over our own stuff, we are then in that moment being the best parent we can be.
yeah, kids first, parents second, hey.
No, parents third,
Who comes second then?
kids. If you put them first and second, there's never going to be any doubt who gets to be first. Oh, unless we're talking about you, Bridget. Of course, you're second to everybody. I get that. Kids, you, everybody else.
So what are the no-nos in terms of co-parenting, especially at this time?
Yeah, there are a couple, and I think the biggest one, and we've all been there. We have to champion our partner to the best of our ability, if the circumstances are appropriate,
Mm,
to say, Mum's looking out for us, Dad's going to do this, whatever that is, so that we don't erode the relationships or the people that represent safety and security from a child's perspective. So, in a normal situation, and we're talking about separation again, if the circumstances are normal, it's just mum and dad saying, hey, we're doing things differently, we're going in two different directions. That's the kind of a typical case. If we're upfront about it, we don't erode those relationships. We do the best we can to support the role of mum and dad from the other person's perspective, if that makes sense. So, say for
yeah.
instance,
Mm,
if I'm talking to a child, we value what mum says, we value what dad has to say, and they have equal weight. And it also means the child has a chance to talk with mum and talk with dad equally about whatever's going on from their perspective. And the difficulty here, from a parent's perspective, we have to park our stuff in that moment and listen.
and how hard is that?
Surprisingly difficult, especially when, the dog's chewing on chocolate, one of the other kids is tearing down the tree, you know, Uncle Bob has got too much Jack in the back room, whatever's going on. All of that stuff's happening at the same time, and we've got a child who's in tears. We have to prioritize, and we have to take those moments to say, okay, what do I need to do now to make this successful for this child? And it may be doing something that normalizes everything and at the same time bring everybody together. Hey, we'll sit down and play a game. Just relax for a moment, if that's
Mm,
at all possible. If we
mm.
take the stress out of the situation by whatever mechanism that that works, park our stuff, address the child, tell them you love them, just be with them.
Time, hey.
Yeah,
They want time. Mm,
that's kind of the funny thing. I think this is perhaps a generalized view of the anthropological view of the world. Westerners, we think that we give stuff, um, whereas the greatest thing I think we can give children is time. And that's an old adage that's been around for
mm,
years. But
yeah.
there's something to be said when a child gains your attention, even if they're talking about a book you've already read that day to them 7 times, or it's the 13th rendition of Snow White, whatever it is, in that moment for that child, it's important to them. We
Mm.
make them feel important by sitting and acknowledging and being with them, because that builds trust. And when you're going through a difficult situation where things have changed, mum's place, dad's place, and things have all different, if in that moment we preserve the best we can and promote those relationships, we're doing the best thing for that child.
Yeah, and it's coming back to having no regrets in terms of the way that you've acted, isn't it? Really as a parent, as a grown
Yep,
up.
yep. But I mean, hey, just keep in mind we're human beings. We're flawed by
Mm,
design, and we
mm,
make mistakes. And here's the thing:
mm.
if we make a mistake and a child notices or a child has something to say, own that and say, "Yeah, I'm late. This is what happened, and it's totally my fault, and I'm really sorry." So own the mistake, because honesty to a child is priceless.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we
That
are
said, don't be
human.
late. Don't be late.
Is there any other advice that you would give to families? Still
Yeah,
a
I
family,
think
and
there's a
two
there's a
separate
couple
ones.
there's a couple of things I think are really helpful when we talk about navigating Christmas. Um, we talk about I talk about resilience, and this kind of applies to life in general. But things are heightened at Christmas because of those demands, those expectations, the change of all of the things that we're going through. And if this is our first Christmas where things are different with mum and dad, we're going to notice what these differences are. So there's a couple of things, and I've touched on them already, but maybe this is something to think about. Telling a child you love them, but doing it at their level. Make eye contact, sit down with them, don't stand over them. Tell them. Spend time doing what you want to do, even if it's not something you want to do.
Mm,
Make this Christmas special for that child.
mm,
Sit with them and let them talk with you. And as I say, even if it's nonsense, if they want to talk to you about pink unicorns and flying bunnies, that's
mhm,
fine. Because, hey, the child wants to talk to you. That's huge. You're allowed to ask them how they're feeling, and they may not necessarily have a really robust or sensible answer, but they will tell you, and it's the fact that they can tell you, want to tell you, means that they trust to share their feelings, whatever their perception is. They're
mm.
talking to you with you about it, and that's kind of really cool. Um, One of my really big ones is do not shout unless there's a safety concern. Stay away from the oven, it's hot. We don't want burnt children, right?
Yeah.
So don't shout. Always speak at a normal voice. And if you want their attention, if you want them to do something, make sure that they can see you. Make sure they acknowledge what you've asked. Give them clear boundaries. And make sure they understand what they need to be doing. And more importantly, perhaps, why they need to do it.
Mm. So no screaming from the bottom of the stairs up the top to up the top.
The only time you can scream is if you're in the shower and you're really hashing your really bad Mariah Carey Christmas song. That you can do, but don't do it to your kids.
Yeah.
And as I say, if they want to be cross or annoyed or upset, sit with that, as painful and as difficult as it is to hear that for them, because of them being able to talk to you about it, again, talks about trust. It may be really confronting to have that. Sit with it. On the other end of the continuum, when they've done something good, make a big deal about it. Say, hey, thank you so much for doing this. Thank you for tidying up what you've just done. I really appreciate it. Make sure you use their name. So here's a good example. Bridget, thank you so much for cleaning up all your messy food that you left all over the floor this morning. I really appreciate it. Do it that
I,
way.
I don't leave this food
Just
on the
you,
floor, by
you
the
just don't feel defensive now. We'll talk about that if you need to. Um, and here's the other thing: when we're talking about change and navigating divorce, separation, is that kids want to know what's happening when and with whom,
way. Mm,
right down to, and this might sound kind of strange, making sure I have things that I want with me, maybe in my own little bag.
mm,
things that I know that I can take and take responsibility for. Here's a really good thing, teaching moment, taking responsibility, that they are in charge of. But that daily routine, make sure they know about it in advance as much as possible. And I appreciate, we're 3 days out from Christmas, but make sure the kids know what's happening Christmas Eve, Christmas Day, Boxing Day, or
yeah,
whatever's happening in terms of custody and arrangements. Whatever you've done, to the best as age applicable, make sure the kids understand what's going on. There's nothing more disconcerting for a child than not knowing. Inside of that, if you're making their meals, make sure there's meals that they want over this time. It doesn't, not
mm,
what you like, what they like, okay?
mm,
And just generally don't be hesitant in giving a child praise for stuff. You might have to micromanage some of it, but they may not necessarily even acknowledge it. They might go, "Oh, Dad, you're being silly," um, but they will still feel good about it. So don't be afraid to do that.
yeah, yeah,
The one thing I was going to say, Christmas Eve, especially for younger children, and I've had a look at the weather forecast here. Avoid watching TV during the day.
mm,
Get out, run around, go to a park. Don't get too close to people because you don't want COVID at Christmas, right? But you may, and this is something to think about, this is individual families, you may want to set an alarm slightly earlier on Christmas Eve so the kids get as much time to run around and do stuff so that they sleep well on Christmas Eve, because it's going to be exciting. They know Christmas is coming, right?
mm, mm,
So sleep the day before so we don't have those sleep induced or lack of sleep induced emotional roller coasters on Christmas Day. Like all
mm,
this excitement, and when we crash, all of a sudden we can't share
mm,
one of our toys and we end up crying.
mm,
Emotional resilience from good sleep is really important.
mm. Very, very good advice. Yeah, even adults need it too. So
Yes,
speaking of
they
adults,
do.
speaking speaking of adults,
Yes.
how do you navigate it as a single person if it's your first one, and what can I expect?
I think if you communicate what it is you're wanting, and this is with your ex, whatever your situation is, if you're upfront about what you want, you've navigated it, something to bear in mind, of course, this may have been mandated in court orders already. You may have already gone through that process. Whatever that agreement is, make sure it works for everybody and stick to it. Now, this is plan A, and life is what happens when plan A can't work. For instance, weather changes things, the car breaks down, someone gets COVID, heaven forbid. So, plan A is what we've agreed to. Plan B is what happens if. Now, that might be something that you talk about beforehand as a
Mhm,
preparation, as a precaution. And here's the thing, when we talk about best laid plans, we also have to think about plans that are unexpected, because here's the little moment. If on Christmas morning plan A falls apart and we fall apart with it, what does a child see? Mum or dad not managing. They'll carry that. But if we're up saying and say, hey, look, this is what we planned today. This has had to change because we're going to do this. We're going to go around to Auntie Bridget's. We're taking pizza and ice cream. And
mm,
tonight we're going to watch your favorite movie 3 times. And Auntie Bridget's going to be so happy. And that's what happens. And in that moment, a parent has just produced calm, has come up with a plan, and a child saying, well, this didn't go well, but they're in control of it. Mum and dad's managing this.
mm,
Yay. So don't be afraid to communicate those wants. Don't be afraid to um, work together for the benefit of the child. Now, you may not necessarily see eye to eye, but I would hope that the parents agree their priority is this little bundle of joy has got this big expectation of going through Christmas. Because there's going to come a time when they may not necessarily believe in Santa anymore, perhaps. But when they're older, it's the spirit of Christmas that then takes over, isn't it?
yeah, 100%. Should you ask the kids what they want to do during the Christmas period?
Absolutely not. You could, but bearing in mind you run the risk of running into disappointments. But here's the thing: you might want to sit down and make a list together of things that might be nice to do. Be
mm,
cautious and be careful you don't back yourself into a situation where there's an absolute set of outcomes. Because
mm,
if you can't meet them or fulfill them, you're going to be seen as the bad guy. And if you're going through separation and divorce, what will happen? Mum didn't let me do this, dad
mm,
didn't let me do that. And
mm,
then what will happen will set up another range of tensions which nobody needs. If you sit down and say, hey, what's some of the things you would like to do? It might be going to the park. It might be going to the beach. It might be going to the movies. Practical things that are doable whilst acknowledging the fact that, again, I'm mindful, perhaps overly so, of the potentiality for COVID over Christmas because it's holidays, there's lots of people around, right?
mm.
But yes, children having choices is a good idea, but be upfront with them and saying, hey, this is a really good list. This would be nice to see if we can do some of these things. Maybe we look at scheduling some of this. And again, that might be with mum and dad. Be upfront about it in the sense that have parents communicate what this is so the child is actually has a sense of agency in what's going on.
So, what about different approaches for different ages?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of go-tos which doesn't really matter what sort of age, but we do need to think about the age appropriateness of what we say, how we say it,
Mm,
checking the level of understanding, because we also want feedback from them in whatever capacity that comes. But I think if we are communicating the honesty of it and the true intent of what it is we want to have happen or what we want to share, I think parents have a good feeling for where the children are at, generally speaking. I think if you're upfront and you're honest and direct, they will respond. Again, you may have to tailor that to their age because obviously a 3-year-old is going to react differently to a 15-year-old.
yeah, yeah. So, what if you? I'm sure there's people out there who are absolutely feeling this at the moment. They're really finding it really difficult to get excited and feel jolly and wanting to celebrate Christmas.
Mm.
What should they do?
Well, here's the thing. If you're generally not feeling it in the moment, you're not alone. It's
Mm,
kind of having to say, all right, if I think back on Christmases past, we've navigated lockdowns. We've navigated all of these things like color coded levels and all the rest of it. We've navigated these things. It's taken a toll. And keep in mind that subconsciously, as we go through this holiday season, there are going to be remnants of, oh, this feels like a lockdown. Everybody's at home, everybody's at me, and I'm actually feeling inundated. So, this is when we might say to friends and family, hey, this morning, can you have the kids, and this afternoon we swap over? Just for pure self indulgence, and it might sound like that, but it's actually not. If
mm,
you take 3 or 4 hours for yourself over the holidays, is that a bad thing? Not at all. If
mm,
you're able to do something for yourself, that means you're taking care of you so that you're able to continue
mm.
investing in everybody else around you. So it sounds like shameless self promotion, but it's not. It's deliberate investment in the people you care about. If you take care of yourself, you're able to continue to care for the people around you who are going to be demanding.
Yeah, yeah. Well, famous last words for 2022, Michael,
Mhm.
for people who are facing their first Christmas and hoping that their co-parenting is going to go well over this period.
Yeah, I think how do you want the Christmas to be remembered?
Mm,
What can you do to make sure that the children have that sense of joy, even if we've just come through a difficult court process, we've come through a difficult separation? What can we do, hand on heart, to say we're doing the best we can with what we have in the situation that we're navigating?
mm,
If you in the moment categorically can say that you are, then everything else eventually down the road is hindsight. But if you do things from the right place in a good place at the right time, it's never going to be the wrong thing.
Acting in
But
your best self, isn't it? You
yeah,
know?
but I do come back to that deliberate self care. It's kind of a homage of mine.
Mm.
If you're able to invest in yourself, you'll take care of the other people around you, because it's navigating a difficult season. At the end of the day, Christmas does come with its own set of stresses.
That's right. That's right. Well, Michael, once again, this has been really invaluable for so many people, particularly at this time of the year. And I am really excited to be um, working with you again next year. We'll do lots of
Likewise,
webinars, podcasts.
you have to
So,
have a different hat though. Just putting that out there.
do you want me to wear a different one for every time we catch up?
Hey, you know what? There's a novelty for 2023. You can have the hat themed webinars. At Halloween, you can dress up as Batman. Just whatever.
What are you going to do? Are you going to wear a wig? You're going to
For
wear different
Halloween.
wigs?
For Halloween.
No, just a different wig for each.
Well, to be fair,
So, thank you very much, Michael, and thank you everyone for joining us this year. We really enjoyed chatting to you, and I'm sure that there's definitely some takeaways for you in all of this. But we'd like to wish you a very, very Merry Christmas. And the biggest thing is to make sure that you look after yourself and you look after others, and have some fun and have some laughs, isn't it? Merry Christmas, everyone.
Merry Christmas.
Bye now. We're still live, I think.